The phone call from Linz, Austria arrived at 3:00 a.m. Majorca time. Rafael Nadal, the 22-time Grand Slam champion, answered the call expecting updates about his academy, the young talents he guides, and the peaceful pace of his retirement life. Instead, what he heard forced him to sit upright in bed. The Upper Austria Ladies Linz Open, a WTA 500 event that had been operating successfully for 35 years, was now in deep crisis. Ticket sales had plummeted dramatically. Sponsors were warning they would withdraw their support completely. According to the frantic tournament director, the cause was straightforward. Alex Eala was not competing. The 20-year-old Filipina star had been left out of the main draw because her world ranking had slipped from number 29 to number 45 following her heavy defeat to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open. The tournament, which had counted heavily on her massive appeal to attract crowds, was now staring at serious financial ruin. The same sponsors who had witnessed her jersey outsell every other player in Miami were now pressing the WTA to step in urgently. Their demand was unmistakable: award Eala a wild card or risk losing millions in revenue. When Nadal learned what unfolded afterward, even the legendary King of Clay was left completely stunned. In April 2026, in Linz, Austria, the Upper Austria Ladies Linz Open had been planned as a grand celebration for its 35th edition, a significant milestone for any WTA tournament. Former champions such as Ekaterina Alexandrova and Jelena Ostapenko were scheduled to lead the lineup, while the prize money had been boosted by more than $140,000 compared to the year before. All preparations were set for a thriving event. However, once the early ticket sales figures arrived, the festive mood quickly shifted to alarm. The organizers had anticipated solid crowds based on past editions, but the actual numbers revealed a shocking decline of over 40% from the previous year. Sessions that used to sell out completely, including quarterfinals, semifinals, and the final, were now barely half filled. The tournament faced potential losses severe enough to endanger its long-term survival. Everyone present immediately recognized the root problem. The powerful Eala effect, which had previously overwhelmed ticket systems in Miami and triggered a 48% surge in Dubai, was entirely missing in Linz. Alex Eala, the 20-year-old Filipina who had risen to become the most popular athlete in women's tennis, was absent from the main draw. Her ranking had fallen from 29 to 45 after her fourth-round loss to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open. And without her presence, the enthusiastic fans who had filled arenas from Melbourne to Miami simply stayed away. The irony was painfully obvious to the officials. They had dedicated 35 years to nurturing ties with local sponsors and media outlets, poured resources into promotional efforts, player growth programs, and venue improvements, yet none of it seemed to matter. The supporters had not attended for the tournament itself. They had come specifically for Alex Eala, and when she was not there, they chose to remain at home. The sponsors' gathering was intended to be a standard session reviewing financial results and future strategies, following the usual business flow of a WTA competition. Yet as soon as the disappointing ticket data was shared, the mood changed sharply. These sponsors had closely monitored the Eala phenomenon over recent months. They had observed the 48% ticket increase in Dubai, seen the Miami Open ticketing system collapse due to overwhelming demand from Filipino fans, and examined sales reports proving Eala's jersey had outsold all other players in the entire field combined. Their conclusion was direct and undeniable. Eala directly translated into substantial revenue. The Linz tournament, with its relatively small ticket base and older audience, was failing to meet their expected returns. They pressed for immediate solutions. When organizers clarified that Eala's ranking drop had excluded her from the main draw, the reaction was swift and firm. One sponsor representative declared they did not care about the method, whether through a wild card, special exemption, or any other means, just ensure she participates, because without her they would not continue their financial backing. This strong ultimatum created major turmoil within the tournament team. WTA regulations stated that wild cards were granted at the organizer's discretion, usually reserved for local athletes or promising newcomers who had not yet secured entry through ranking. Eala, positioned at number 45, would not normally qualify for such an exemption. However, the situation was far from ordinary. The event was heading toward financial collapse, sponsors were ready to exit, and the sole remedy appeared to be including a player who had been omitted solely due to a ranking system that failed to consider her exceptional drawing power. The WTA suddenly found itself trapped in a difficult dilemma. While rules clearly limited wildcards to players who had not earned entry by ranking, and Eala at number 45 did not meet the standard criteria, the circumstances were exceptional. The Linz Open risked total financial failure. Sponsors threatened to pull out, ticket sales had crashed, and the one athlete capable of filling the stands was being blocked by a system that overlooked her true commercial impact. Internal WTA conversations were said to be highly heated. Some leaders insisted on strictly following the existing rules no matter the outcome. Others countered that the regulations existed to support the sport, and if they were instead damaging it, then adjustments were necessary. The ranking system alone does not fully capture a player's worth to the game. One unnamed source shared with journalists that Alex Eala had clearly demonstrated her ability to pack stadiums, boost merchandise sales, and bring fresh audiences into tennis, and this contribution held real importance. The WTA must therefore discover appropriate ways to acknowledge that worth, possibly via wild cards, adjusted seeding, or even a full revision of the ranking framework. Ultimately, the choice made was historic and unexpected. The WTA declared that Alex Eala would be granted a wild card into the Linz Open main draw, with the formal announcement highlighting the unique conditions and her remarkable role in expanding women's tennis. The news sparked instant criticism from certain sides, with detractors claiming the WTA was unfairly altering its own guidelines to favor a player who had not qualified on merit. At the same time, many viewed it as an essential evolution for a sport that was transforming rapidly. The Eala effect had been widely debated in tennis communities for some time, but the Linz emergency elevated the discussion to entirely new levels. The key question became why one individual's involvement was so vital to an event's economic health. Marketing specialists had explained for months that the reason lay in deep emotional connection. To the global Filipino community, Eala represented far more than just a tennis competitor. She stood as a powerful symbol of achievement and possibility. She proved that a young girl from Manila could compete on the grandest platforms and gain global recognition. She personified the overseas worker Filipino dream, showing that dedication and effort could produce remarkable outcomes. When athletes hail from nations like the Philippines, arenas transform into passionate Davis Cup-style atmospheres. As one experienced referee had noted earlier that year, crowds cheer for their entire country rather than solely for one athlete. This bond directly drives economic benefits. In Dubai, ticket sales rose 48% with her in the lineup. Miami, her merchandise outsold every other competitors combined. In Linz, her absence pushed the tournament toward financial crisis. The statistics left no room for doubt. Eala's participation delivered millions through tickets, sales, and publicity, while her non-appearance inflicted equivalent losses. The WTA, after years of efforts to expand the sport, had at last discovered an athlete who could genuinely achieve that expansion, yet they struggled to manage the situation effectively. For Alex Eala herself, receiving the wild card for the Linz Open meant much more than simple tournament entry. It served as strong confirmation that her importance to tennis extended well beyond ranking points. Her position had declined from 29 to 45 after the fourth-round defeat to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open, as the 390 points gained from her outstanding 2025 semifinal performance had now expired. The clay court season lay ahead, including stops in Linz, Stuttgart, Madrid, Rome, and Roland Garros. The difficulties were genuine: slower surfaces, higher bounces, extended rallies, and the requirement for greater patience and smart tactics that hard courts rarely test. Still, she possessed an asset no ranking list could ever quantify: the unwavering affection of an entire nation prepared to support her no matter the location. In Linz, she would enter as the number 7 seed, positioned behind established names like Alexandrova, Towson, Samanova, Ostapenko, Navarro, and Raducanu. She would confront rivals with superior clay court experience, multiple titles on the surface, and little left to demonstrate. Yet she would bring an advantage they lacked: the backing of thousands of Filipino supporters who had journeyed all the way to Austria just to watch her compete. "I could win the entire event or exit in the opening match," Eala remarked during a podcast conversation with former world number 1 Andy Roddick. "If I don't succeed here, I will succeed elsewhere." These statements reflect the mindset of a future champion. With the wild card secured, she now has the opportunity to demonstrate exactly that. The Linz Open had teetered on the edge of financial collapse. Ticket sales had fallen sharply. Sponsors were prepared to abandon their involvement. Tournament leaders identified the straightforward reason: Alex Eala was not participating. The 20-year-old Filipina had slipped from number 29 to number 45 in the global rankings after her decisive loss to Karolina Muchova at the Miami Open. In her absence, the dedicated fans who had filled venues from Melbourne to Miami chose not to attend. The event risked losses that might jeopardize its continued existence. At that point, the sponsors intervened decisively. In a move never seen before, they insisted the WTA provide Eala with a wild card for the main draw. Their position was blunt: include her or we withdraw. Facing a self-created emergency, the WTA eventually agreed. Rafael Nadal, who had mentored and trained Eala at his academy for 7 years, observed the entire situation from Mallorca. "I have never witnessed a tournament's economic stability hinge so completely on one player who is not even listed in the draw," he commented. "This is completely unprecedented." As Eala now gears up for the full clay campaign, Linz, Stuttgart, Madrid, Rome, Roland Garros, she carries an intangible strength that rankings cannot calculate, the awareness that her true worth to the sport goes far beyond mere numbers. The so-called Czech curse on her record remains intact and her clay court history is limited, but she holds a force more potent than any data point, the passionate love of a nation whose voice will not be quieted. Was the WTA correct in granting Eala a wild card into the Linz Open? Share your opinions in the comments section below. Subscribe to Rally Radar today for regular WTA updates, detailed match analysis and narratives that explore far more than just the final score. Because at Rally Radar, every single day is match day.